miracles do happen, and God does answer prayer. Um, I've been going to Haiti for ever since we lived there in 1989, 1990. So for 30 years, I've been going back every year, sometimes a couple times a year. On one of my trips to Haiti, there was a widow lady there who had 5 children. Her and her husband had been part of the church. They were some of the first members of the church there, and her husband had stomach ulcer problems, and when he was in his 40s, probably he had a bleeding stomach ulcer and died. So she was left with her 5 children. On one of my visits there, I got there and was going to be there for a week. And um, when I got there, they told me that um, this widow lady, her daughter, was um, quite sick. And so I went to visit her, and she had the daughter was probably 8 or 9 years old, and she had had typhoid fever. And as a result of her typhoid fever, she got a bowel blockage and became very, very sick. And she had lost a lot of weight from the typhoid fever, and then she lost more weight from the bowel blockage. So they took her to a good hospital about several hours away, and she had surgery, and they took out a section of her bowel and stitched everything back together. And then they told her that when she wants to sit up, she's not supposed to sit straight up. She's supposed to roll over on her side and then sit up sideways and then get up. But I don't think she really understood their instructions and what they had told her to do. And a day or two after the surgery, she sat up and she burst the incision. She pulled the stitches through the skin, and the doctor looked at it and said, "Well, there's nothing I can do. Like, she's so skinny and has lost so much weight. There's nothing there to work with, and I can't do anything with it." So he sent her home. So when I went to visit her, there she was. Her mother had a little two-room house, and she was in the back room of the house on the bed. She was curled up in a fetal position, and she just looked like the pictures you see of starving children. Her knees were bigger than her legs above or below. Her knees, her elbows were larger than her arms below or above her elbows, and she was just curled up there in a fetal position, and her mother was fanning the flies off of her, and her incision was standing open, uh, probably maybe an inch and a half, and and it just looked like something that was just ripe for infection. And so I asked the pastor, I said, why did they send her home, like, in this condition? And he said, well, they sent her home because she's going to die, and they don't want her to die at the hospital, because if she dies at the hospital, then the family will blame the hospital. So they sent her home so that she dies at home. I said, well, that she shouldn't die from that. Like, that's not something that she should die from. That can be fixed. And he said, well, that doctor that did the surgery, he is a really good surgeon, and he operates on foreigners, and if he can't fix it, there's nobody in Haiti that can fix it. I said, okay, well then I'm going to take her somewhere else and I'll get it fixed. He said, where are you going to take her? I said, well, I'll take her back to Canada, or I'll take her to the United States. I'll work on getting her somewhere where it can be fixed, because a child should not die from that. And he said, you can't do that. I said, don't tell me I can't do it. And he said, well, you can't. I said, well, why can't I do it? And he said, well, you can't do it because um, her parents don't read and write, and they never registered her birth. So um, she's going to need a passport to be able to go overseas, and she doesn't even have a birth certificate, and her birth probably was never registered. So until you get her birth registered and you get her a birth certificate so that you can apply for the passport, she's going to be dead. So you can't do it. I said, okay, well, I guess you're right. I guess I can't do it. But a child should not die from that. That's just not right. Ricky Wright from Georgia was with me and said, okay, Ricky, we're going to pray and we're going to ask God to heal this little girl. And so we prayed and we stood there in that widow's home and we said, God, you say that you are a father to the fatherless and a husband to the widows. And here's a chance for you to prove that that's true because this girl should not die from what is wrong with her. If we could take her to another country, we would, but we can't. So we're asking you to heal her, and we know it looks impossible, but we're asking you if you would just reach down and touch her and heal her. So we left the house, and the Haitian pastor said, "Well, I'll try to make sure she doesn't die a painful death." And so I would visit her during the week that I was there, and the pastor would go and he would change the dressing on her incision. I think he put some antibiotic powder in there or something. I don't know, but he would change the dressing, and I left, and at the end of the week she was still alive, and a few weeks later I talked to the Haitian pastor, and he said, yeah, she's still living, and um, I forget how long after, but a few weeks or a month after, the pastor said, you know what, Pastor Merle, like there's skin growing over that incision, and in a few months that healed. And so Pastor Paul, the Haitian pastor, he told the mother, you need to take her back to the hospital and show her to the surgeon who did that surgery because he needs to know that she didn't die, that she actually lived. So the mother took the daughter back to the hospital and went back to the surgeon that had done the surgery and showed him the girl. And the surgeon said, I want to meet the person who treated her. And so the mother came back and she told Pastor Paul, that surgeon wants to meet you because he said he wants to meet the person who treated this girl. And Pastor Paul just laughed and he said, well, that's not me. If he wants to meet the person that treated her, he's going to have to meet the Lord Jesus because it's the Lord Jesus who healed her. And that was true. And so that girl was touched by the hand of God, and God spared her life. Today, she's an adult. She's a lovely young woman. She has a horrendous scar, but God spared her life. And I got to be there and see him do that.